you love music that was good 5 years ago. They're like your taste in music is so good if it was only 5 years ago. That's what I said. That's so funny. There we go. Okay. Hey, Bean. Welcome. I'm just gonna go straight into it. Okay, Doja, you're on camera now. Just letting you know.
Oh my god. like does that mean that I'm like pinned and people can only see me right now?
People can see both of us, and they can see Women Racing Class by Angela Davis. Yeah.
Cool. Well, hi everybody. Y'all would be tickled to know this, but I like have never engaged with like any streaming platform, so this is just like an experience for me. We'll see if I like it. If I'll come back. I'll come back.
Let's see. I think you'll come back. Let's see. They're saying music is loud, so I'm gonna turn that down a little bit. There we go. How's that? Is that a little bit better, sliced cheese? If you go to Doja Bird, by the way, if you go to twitch.tv/Comrade Gomer, then you can follow the chat. I'm going to be interacting with the chat, but you can feel free to also, if you'd like, interact with the chat. Hey, Bean, I'm glad you're here. How's the, you heard me and Doja talking for a second. How is that? Is that all right? Y'all let me know. Wilco, thank you for following. Appreciate that. So Doja, another thing is there's gonna be a ton of interruptions and shit. I will try my hardest not to interrupt you. But the way this stream thing works is that like people follow and it makes noises and people can put little emojis on the screen and people will be talking, and so like I'll be if you can look at the chat, cool. If you can't, then I'll field questions between the chat and you.
Okay, and, I can see the chat. So okay, I have my one screen, so that just means what I won't be able to do as I switch back and forth is look at myself in the tiny little thing that I have, but that's actually for the best. I don't get distracted.
That's awesome. Hey, Jason Voorhees, welcome. I'm glad y'all can hear me and you can hear Doja good, because I was worried about that. I had Tian spitting on last time, and I just for some reason when I have him on, it's always like my damn audio is going wild. So, hey, Sean, welcome. Tian was on and we talked about Malcolm X. It was really good. At least I thought. I mean, I appreciate him doing it. I don't know if he thought it was good. Chantilly! Hey, Fork Nickel. Yeah, Chantilly is very excited about this Doja Bird, so we're going to try to give them a good show.
I'm going to forget something super important, and then y'all will come back around and be like, how could she? Like, and then I'll learn something. I'll learn something, and I'll come back and I'll be like, y'all taught me something. That's how this is supposed to work, right?
Oh, all the time. My chat teaches me things all the time. And let me tell you something. Don't be afraid to say something goofy, because the other day I was talking about the connection between modern proto-fascist and crypto-fascist movements like Boogaloo Boys and the past fascist movements. And I was getting all excited, and I was like, oh, you see, they started out as socialists. The whole point is that they co-opt socialist language, and I show this picture, and I don't speak German, but it said death to Marxism, and I was like, look, Marxism right there. And everybody in the chat was like, Gomer, it says death to Marxism.
You wouldn't know that. You don't know German. Hey. Well, that means everybody's like really on top of it though, right?
Oh yeah, I was like,
what it also shows is that y'all aren't afraid to like push back. And I really like that. I think it's really important that, we have, I mean, in the parasocial relationships that we have, I guess, on the internet, that there is some level of like you can be like, hey, that's not correct. And then you can take that, and be like, oh shit, I was out of pocket on that.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's like the little pieces of like relationship building that's part of the bigger part of like movement building that I appreciate. So that, even though it's funny and like cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Doja, I'll tell you one thing. I wish I would have asked you on for my talk about restorative justice, because some of your ideas on that and your ideas on community building. I just think that stuff is really important right now. I feel like so often we spend so much time on the theory side of things, and we just like bypass so much of the community building that is necessary for things to have any kind of longevity.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Like, I mean, obviously, because it's like, I mean, especially right now, I was like tweeting earlier about like how people just aren't creative, and it's not really like when it comes to like abolish the police, I was just like, and it's not really people's fault that they're not creative. Like, every part of our society really stifles creativity, and it starts in school systems, it starts in the homes that we grow up in, and like, so a lot of these conversations aren't surprising, but it's like the frustrating part is when someone's like, how do you abolish the police? Like, tell me how that's going to work. And then you actually start to tell them things, and they're like, no. And you're like, I'm giving you like a real concrete answer. Actually, like mine even, but like 3 hours ago, I was talking to someone on Facebook, and I was just like, okay. So they were like, well, how do you protect people? And I was just like, well, okay, we build up in these other areas. And they're just like, well, what if someone is attacking my home? I need the police. And I'm just like, why are people attacking your home? What are you doing? Like, let's stop that for a second. Like, what's happening? And it's just, they're not thinking, right? They're just like saying like whatever weird talking point. But yeah, those conversations get really, they're interesting. I'd be happy to like chat about like my experiences with like restorative justice, or just like anything about Ruth Wilson Gilmore that people are just not reading about prison abolition. It makes me really sad, because we have this conversation like every, it's like every news cycle, every time a Black person is murdered by the state, like we have the same conversation over and over. And I'm just like, are y'all reading the books? Or
yeah.
So anyway,
no,
over.
No, this is what we call a ranting safe space. So you can rant as much as you want. But yeah, I mean, super valuable points, Doja. Thank you. Is it cool if I continue to call you Doja Bird in this?
Yeah. Okay. That's what everybody keeps calling me. So I'm just like, and it's so funny. I made my Twitter account in like 2017. When, of course, Doja Cat's Moo was really popular. And I was like, but it's going to be a bird. And then, like, now that's just the name that I tweet under.
That's my life. That's so funny. I mean, I feel like everybody's screen names ends up being like that. Like, I mean, full commie, whatever. That's like, or all commie now. That's just throwaway garbage. It's not even really interesting. But I remember when I was in high school and I was making my first email address, and I was like, all right, it's gonna be so badass. It's gonna have like the plagues, and it's gonna have like biblical shit in there, and like 2 years later or 3 years later, when I'm going to college, I'm like, I can't tell anybody this email address. This this is entirely too embarrassing. People will think I'm wild.
Ultimate liberal cringe, because my first email address was, I'll just go ahead and tell y'all because there's no way it's still active, malfoychick01 at hotmail.com.
Oh,
because
boy.
I was that Harry Potter person. Like, I went to the like midnight when the books were coming out. I'm not even talking about movies. And I would read that shit.
I was too. I was like that too.
And yeah, so Now I'm just like, why'd I say that? So yeah. I Slytherin, whatever. It's fine. No, I'm not gonna get too like, what is it? Read another book, anti-Harry Potter action. Please read another book. I swear I've read other books. I've read other books. I promise.
That's funny as hell. Chantilly says blessed. That's good.
It was my username on the Anime News Network also. All right, we won't talk about the Anime News Network.
ANN. Okay, so everybody, this is Doja Bird. That's a great segue into what we're talking about today because they're so related. Today we're talking about Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis. So presented by me, Comrade Gomer, and my friend Doja Bird. So the way, Doja, if you want to give a little introduction to yourself, it doesn't have to be any kind of way. You can just talk about, anything that's important to you and how you would introduce yourself to God.
Ooh, how would I? Well, I don't think God already knew me. I mean, I just been out here just reading the books. I've been around forever, God. He'd be like, I just don't know you. Can't place you at all. So hi y'all. I'm Doja Bird. What are things well, I guess I'd say first and foremost, I am a Southerner. I am stuck in New England now, but I don't know, something about connecting with y'all on Twitter has made me appreciate my Southern upbringing way more than I think I have. But I think I'm also just feeling all the woes of being isolated up here and that none of the food has seasoning. It's real hard. So yeah, I used to say oh, I'm from New Orleans area, but that's not really true. It's everyone says that because we don't want to go into a whole explanation of, okay, so the state looks like a boot, and then here is Michigan people do that with their hand, and we never do that. We don't point to our foot and go but whatever. So I'm actually from two towns in Louisiana. One is Hammond, Louisiana, which is 45 minutes from Baton Rouge. It's just a really small country town. And then also from northern Louisiana, yay, divorced parents. A little town called Monroe, Louisiana, which I do honestly, I like to brag that Monroe, Louisiana is the birthplace of Huey Newton. I just so y'all know. So yeah, I primarily grew up there in a really small Black church, Tabernacle Baptist Church, 810 Friard Street, Monroe, Louisiana. I was in our step team, so I had to remember the address. But I was on the step team. It's a requirement. And yeah, so now I live, I would say I was just actually talking with Gomer about this, how did I become radicalized? Because that's always the question, it's I used to tell people oh, I was watching Colbert Report one night, in college, and he had Michelle Alexander on, who wrote The New Jim Crow. And I read that book because I was oh, I'm really interested, what she's saying. I was just way too many people are in prison. And she was just we got to do something to fix this, really more reform. But after I read that book, they were if you want more readings, I suggested Angela Davis, actually, but another book by her, Our Prison's Obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that was 90 pages, so I was just I'll read that. And because I was that's short, so I ordered it from Amazon. I remember it was $10, and that book, she just it's. I highly recommend, if you have not read other Angela Davis books, to check out Our Prison's Obsolete. It's so short, but it really just says so much. And so then I knew that I was more radical. I think I had always known I was more radical. The thing I was saying to Gomer was, I was I'm pretty sure my pastor growing up was a communist. If he's not, or at least hella sympathetic, because I definitely learned all of my community values from church, and a lot of it was, a lot about sharing what you have, which is still one of my I don't know, a super basic thing for me. So yeah, I think I've always been radical, but I just didn't know. And so it was through reading, the Overton window shifted for me. And I was oh, wait, there are other things I can be. I remember when I found out about Dr. Cornel West, and he was I'm a radical Democrat. I was oh, that's me. That's the thing. And then, 2 years later, I was wait, no, there's a whole other thing that you can be over here. What's that about? So yeah, I used to work as a community organizer with formerly incarcerated people in New Orleans area. And But it just, I don't know, a lot of it was about like, I won't get into that. That's like too much for like right now.
Okay. Anything you want to is okay.
Boston, and I've been up here. I now work at an interfaith organization, and that's kind of, I don't know if I should say like there. And I've had varying interactions. You know, it's like I mostly started organizing. I mean, I like got into politics in college, but I worked for the Obama campaign. I was joking with one of y'all like 2 weeks ago about this. Like, and that's why it's part of the reason why I'm here, I guess, even though I'm clearly super nervous about like streaming. I think it's so great that like so many of y'all who are like younger than me, because I'm in my 30s, you're like younger and more radical. So like you like right now are miles ahead of where I was at your age.
Yeah.
I worked for the Obama campaign, and so I just think it's really important to commune with y'all. That's like why I'm on Twitter too. It's like I want to see what y'all are doing, and I just think it's, you know, as much as we could talk all day about like, is this real organizing? Is this meaningful? I think that like late stage capitalism hella sucks, and like if it's not nothing that we get to have little spaces of time, like little pockets of time with each other. And especially, you know, this week has been really hard, and every week's hard, but also this week. And so I just wanted, I guess, to say like, you know, I probably haven't said a lot about who I am because I got a little bit off topic, but like, thanks for being here and like sharing this time and with like sharing yourself like here, and letting me come on and like talk to y'all and ramble a little bit.
That's great, Doja. That's fantastic. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I forget to thank the people who come as well. I mean, I say thank you enough, but yeah, I appreciate you starting us off like that, because that's so nice, because you're right. Really, we are just fellowshipping in a way.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. See, you know too exactly what I'm talking about. I see somebody in the chat, Wilco93, said, yeah, world conditions have necessitated younger radicalization. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
because shit is not good at all right now. Like, you know, it's just like, I can just think about, oh my gosh, my college years and how just the Democrats will fix it.
Oh, let me tell you something. When Obama won, this is embarrassing shit, but when Obama won, I wore a suit to class because I was like, I'm just proud to be an American today. I thought everything was going to change.
Proud to be an American.
Yes, exactly.
No,
yes, Bean, I did.
I went to a school where we had to sing that Wednesday chapel. Like, I don't even know what that was, and that's why I still know it.
So yeah, it is some Hank Hill shit, Grim, and I'm not cringe. Fuck you, Jason. Oh boy. All right, we're gonna get back on track here. So yeah, you're right, Darth Aztec. I was like, change we can believe in. Oh boy. OG Rose Gomer, yes, indeed. Oh shit. Okay, so how this gonna go today is we're gonna hit the first 7 chapters of the book. The book is fantastic, but there's so much to cover, and I knew that Doja Bird and I was gonna have a lot to talk about, so we just decided to focus on the first 7 chapters, and they're all. I mean, the whole book is just such a banger, and it's so easy to read. I really recommend it. We'll cover the next set of chapters on a later date. A couple of warnings up front. This book goes over some extremely heavy stuff. Oh, shit. Oh, motherfucker. Oh, wait. Did it come back? Yeah, it came back. Okay. Sorry. Every time this is stupid as hell. Apparently, every time I change screens, my video goes out. Oh, god damn it. This fucking world. All right. Is this? Hey, y'all. Hold on, Doja Bird.
At least, hey, they're dunking on Obama in the chat, so I think everyone's
That's good. Okay, y'all tell me, does it come back on? Is it on now? Is it back on now? Y'all tell me, is the video back on now? Okay, very good. It's back on. Okay, I know what I got to do. This is some dumb shit. I'm sorry, Doja Bird.
Sorry.
So, yeah, I am indeed a tech boomer, and I embrace it. I love that about myself. I sing myself and celebrate myself, bitches. Okay.
What I really want is one of those like VR headset things where you can just have like multiple screens in front of you. If anyone knows about those, I need someone to explain it to me, because I like know I would love it, but I'm also very afraid of the Matrix. So it's like both.
Well, I mean, as someone who's played around with those, my just for work and such, they ain't as wild as they seem. Whenever they start beaming the shit directly into our heads, that's when I'll be scared. Okay, so just real quick, trigger warnings. Stop, Sean. Trigger warnings. This book goes over some extremely heavy stuff. Several different kinds of violence. All right, so I really want y'all to know that, like, Angela Davis doesn't pull any punches. She very much explains what things were like. Maybe she does pull punches. I mean, there's no way of describing slavery that is good enough to really understand what happened, the depth of the cruelty. But she does describe things in a way that, compared to a lot of history books, is quote unquote unsanitized. And also, Doja Bird is going to be responding to my slides and questions, which may be ignorant and do not reflect on Doja Bird. So, yes, Spectral, thank you. You can mute and leave anytime. That's a good thing. Truth is that
trigger warning, American history.
Yeah, trigger warning, American history, exactly. But I'll tell you right off the bat, Spectral Melodies, the first slide is a little bit rough, but then things do get a little bit better after that. All right, so let's jump right into it. Okay, so the legacy of slavery, standards for a new womanhood. Oh, god dang it. Hold on. I got to do this, and then I got to do this. There we go. Okay, so there were a lot of books that are written on slavery, but so many missed the particular evils that were done to women. And Angela Davis goes into this right at the very beginning, that women were exploited like men, forced to work and produce just like the men, and were even, Angela Davis says, even prized for costing less in upkeep, but they were punished specifically as women through things like systematic rape. So I just want, Doja, I would like to ask, like, do you feel like the average American understands has any idea about what slavery was actually like, or is it basically on the level of like, and the Native Americans taught the Pilgrims how to grow corn?
I mean, short answer, no. I don't think we, something I can say from like my own, like, growing up in the Deep South is that even in my like American history classes, when we like talked about slavery, it was always very brief. And I had the very weird experience. I'm probably not alone in this, but I went to a like private all-white school. So anytime we had to talk about slavery, everybody like looked back at me.
Oh no!
Oh, it was like me and my sister and like one other person. That was it. And so like. But I remember how it was spoken about. I actually had a teacher. I won't say his name, but I'll never forget it. I remember first and last names of people. But he actually was had a PhD in like American history. And he said that slaves, he was like enslaved people. Well, actually, he just said slaves. He didn't say enslaved Africans. He wasn't woke at all. Mm-hmm. He was just like, they weren't treated badly. And the analogy that he gave, he was just like, okay, so you have your laptop. He was just like, if your laptop isn't working right, like, you don't throw your laptop across the room, do you? And we were all like, no. And he was just like, so, boom, prove my point. Like, slaves were abused. I just remember sitting in class being like, yo, I think this dude is lying to us. Like, I'm pretty sure because by then I had read a few like slave narratives. I highly recommend if you've never read a slave narrative. I think that's really, they're just like, some of them are just so short or they go on forever. You know, it's like, what is it, 12 Years a Slave? But we don't read those. It's definitely, I mean, yeah, short answer, no. Definitely it's not even so much as that it's like, I feel like sugar coated. It's like this light, like, I'm gonna give you a little dusting of sugar, but we're just not gonna talk about this at all, actually. Like, moving on. And then Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and so it really wasn't that bad, and it didn't go on for that long, and like, next chapter, like, that's it. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't really talk about it at all, mostly because I grew up, in the South, and we literally, in our textbook, they called it the Civil War, but our teacher would say, okay, now what we call it is the War of Northern Aggression. I mean, it is a racist thing to say right off the bat, right? And
oh yeah. I mean, I went to school with the people who had, like, rebel flags on everything. I used to actually, it didn't bother me. I was like, oh yeah, heritage, not hate. I was just like, that. I was like, that's a fair way for them to feel about it, I guess. Like, knowing, but not like, I didn't rock the boat when I was a student, to be honest. I never did anything like that. So, but now I'm just like, for example, if I see a Confederate flag all the way up here, which actually does happen because New Hampshire exists, which is, woo, what is that? Like, I'm like shocked. I'm like, what is that doing here?
Yeah.
Like, but they were super commonplace in my school. So
same.
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about Confederate flags a lot, but I would prefer not to, but we could. But yeah, one other thing that we were taught, and I think Angela Davis goes over this quite, like, in a very powerful way, is this idea that slaves didn't fight back. It's implied 1,000 times. And Angela Davis talks about how, not just men, but black women as well. The enslaved people would fight back extremely hard, constantly. That there are maroon communities, and there were, people helping each other escape, daring acts of bravery. That they would poison their masters. That they would, secretly learn how to write. And it wasn't just like in, I forget which movie. I mean, it's in Roots, isn't it? But it wasn't just like, hey, I want to learn just to learn. It's like, hey, I want to learn so that I can, like, live, because them keeping me uneducated is the one way that they are truly able to keep power over me. And like, I read about these things, and like, I'm so glad you mentioned the slave narratives, because it's like, it was powerful. Every little snippet of the slave, what slaves were, or what freed African Americans were saying in, like, that Angela Davis includes. I was like, wow, like, it's just a window into a soul of a person of another time who truly could have been like you or I. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think that's like one of the, like, the biggest, like, things that I just, like, ended up internalizing about enslaved people was that, like, it, like, the pieces about Uncle Tom's Cabin. Like, I definitely thought, like, oh, well, my ancestors probably weren't that mad about slavery. Like, because I didn't know about the uprisings. Like, I didn't learn about John Brown until I was in college. So, like, and I think I only learned about him because of, like, I think Django Unchained came out around that time. And so, like, people were having way more conversations about what actually happened during slavery than I'd ever seen, like, on my Facebook feed. And I was like, whoa.
Fair.
So, yeah, I definitely thought that, like, my ancestors just didn't know another way, which is ridiculous because they were free people when they were kidnapped from Africa. So, like, where did I even get that idea? Well, the idea is everywhere.
Exactly.
It's like, they'll teach you about rebellions, so you just assume that everyone accepted. And I think too, growing up in the church, like, and like, though my church was, like, progressive, I went to school with white evangelicals who repeated things about, like, oh, the slaves were happy to been taken from Africa, and, like, if that hadn't happened, then you wouldn't be saved, you wouldn't have been baptized, like, none of that. So, like, I definitely thought that. I didn't know, like, people would make that argument to me and I would find it like weird, but I didn't know why it made me feel weird until I was, older, and I was like, oh wait, that's racist.
That's just racist.
Oh, that's why I didn't like the way that it felt in my spirit was because it was racist. And so yeah, it does give you the impression, and then but then you get like Harriet Tubman. Like if you learn about one person, like you'll be like, and then Harriet Tubman freed a few. The slaves that really, really didn't want to be slaves, they got freed, so it was actually fine. That's all I ever know.
I know. It's so bad. And it's so, chat's going off about John Brown. But yeah, talking about Harriet Tubman, exactly. Like the most shameful thing of all, living in Georgia, we went to a Harriet Tubman reenactment thing. It was like one of those things where it's like one actor on a stage and they're telling the story of Harriet Tubman. They become Harriet Tubman, right? And I remember walking out of that and thinking, wow, Harriet Tubman was nice. And like years later being like, nice is not the word. Like that, I mean,
good for her.
I know this. It's like Harriet Tubman was like a hero in the sense of like old Viking stories hero, like near superhuman level hero,
yeah,
right?
She's like legendary,
right?
And
legendary.
She, like, does not get love. Like it's amazing, and they're like, we want to put her on money, and I'm just like,
y'all don't.
It makes me laugh. Like I have to laugh because I'm just like, Harriet Tubman would have hated all of you who were trying to put her on money, and
Absolutely.
the way that she spoke, she would not have been cool with it. And she would just have one question. She'd be like, "Did you do reparations? Did
no.
you?"
She's like, "No, okay, I'm out of here."
So anyway, yeah, all that. I keep going. Yeah, all that. Whatever. Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't learn. I remember I believe I learned about the rebellion in Haiti before I learned that it happened on American soil.
Wow, that's wild.
And in that, I only learned that because like I happened to meet a Haitian person who was like, yeah, that was a thing that happened. I was like, and we're still mad? Like how long? Still mad? Like, amazing.
Oh shit. I mean, that's hilarious. I just want to say one thing about John Brown. So this is some white boy shit, so y'all just forgive me for the next 15 seconds. But I have to say that white people have so few actual heroes to look to. We have so few people that we can actually look at and be like, yeah, that person did a good thing. Like everybody else, it's like they made some shit up about them so that we will think they're good, and otherwise they are absolute shitheels. And like all the founding fathers, everybody that I even learned about in my family, you know what I mean? Like when I looked at my family history tree, it's like, wow, y'all, like my granddad, when he built this whole family history tree thing, it's like he built a very nice story up, but I just did 2 seconds of digging deeper and I was like, oh, those are bad people. Every single one of them is a bad person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that reading this really hit home for me. Not about John Brown. I mean, like John Brown is like every communist white man loves John Brown because he's the only person that we can be like, oh yeah, I want to be like him.
Y'all do. And like John Brown is like, that's the thing. It's like sometimes I'll talk about like my like misgivings about John Brown, but like I never want to take John Brown away from y'all because if John Brown ain't there, you have like nobody. So it's like he was hella eccentric, and then especially, obviously coming from previously like being in the SRA, like everybody had a freaking John Brown like icon. So I just had to question it all the time, and I was just like, where are your Harriet Tubman icons? Huh? Like that. Like I'm not trying to. Nah, I was just like, again, everybody. I don't know. I mean, like people would be like, oh, like kill your heroes and all that, and I'm just like, but like. It's kind of bleak when you don't have at least a little something,
Exactly. I totally agreed.
But yeah, I to your point about like just, not having anyone, honestly, because it's been a bit since I've looked at this work. something that really stood out to me was how, and I mean, you know, we'll probably talk about it later, like, but like the women's suffrage like leaders are not good people.
Bad.
Every single one of them.
So bad.
Is fucking up. Like, and it's so something that was interesting in the last chapter that we'll look at is so I do a lot of like faith healing work. I'm a movement chaplain, and I have done a lot of work in like the Unitarian Universalist like area. And Lucy Stone like is mentioned in this because she was a Unitarian.
Yeah.
UUs didn't exist till 1960. It's a whole thing. But anyway, and I was shocked to see that her husband is out here spitting just dribble, because like I definitely almost lived in like a UU cooperative house named for her, because she like lived and died in Dorchester, which is like an area of Boston. And so I lived in the area, and I was like, oh, Lucy Stone, I should learn who she is once upon a time. And then I was reading this and I was like, oh shit, no. That's who she is. She was married to like a racist, and she was and everybody was racist. But like, it's just like you see that like we've venerated people in the American, what's that term for it? The American civil religion. Like we have these figures, founding fathers, like, and the suffragettes are also kind of in that. Like they're like, for the feminists, you have these, like,
yes,
but all of that's fictitious, and all of that works to prop up this like America is super great like narrative. And then you really, really look at it and you're just like, these people, I don't know, like it. I mean, so much of this text is really like you're just reading it and you're just like, somebody could have written these sentences today and you would have thought that it was about a lot of the same shit that we're talking about. Like. And I don't know, in that way, I guess I could read it as sad, but I didn't come away from the work feeling sad. Like, I tend to not, you know, I come away with it with like, now I know more about why like this doesn't work. Like a lot of this is like, we wanted to do reform things. So like voting was like, oh, well, if we have the right to vote, then like, we're going to fix this country and like, we'll have more say in this country. And like a lot of the abolitionists were like, well, we want to abolish slavery because it's the one thing that's wrong with capitalism. It's just the subjugation of this group of people. And then once we don't have that anymore, like, what was the guy, Garrison? He was like a rabid, like anti-unionist, I learned.
Yes.
So it's like, well, yeah, like what were they doing? Like, anyway, so in a way, like abolitionists were like actually like pretty single issue. And then you get into the abolitionists who were like, actually, we want to liberate all the enslaved Africans. It's like, yeah. And then we want to send them back to Africa. and they all like against each other. They were like, this is a very reasonable stance that we've taken. Like, what?
It's so bad. It's so bad.
It's so bad. So like, who do you even, I mean, like, when you look at just like the dredge of who abolitionists actually were, John Brown? Looking pretty good.
Yeah. Right. Weird as hell as he is. Yes.
Weird as hell. Looking pretty good.
You know, I have a couple of slides in here that I talk about like this is my takeaway, and I look forward to getting to those slides because like so much of what you just mentioned is kind of what I tried to put into those slides of like, yeah, this is the same stuff that we're dealing with now. And the big issue that I keep coming away with is if you let single issue people drive the conversation, and if you let the petty bourgeoisie like NGOs, like because these are really the NGOs of the time, right? If you let these people run your movements, then it will always have this element of decay and weakness, and of course they won't record these other very virile movements that were going on at the same time. I mean, I'll get to it in another slide in a bit, but there was this whole suffrage movement that was started by the working class women 10 years before Susan B. Anthony, right? So it's just one of those things where even the funny thing is Angela Davis gives a shit about this, and she can't even find names from that movement, right? She doesn't even put name, and she's very concerned with putting names in because she wants to preserve this history in this book,
right?
And she can't even find names. She can only find hints and like little bits about it, right? Because they were suppressing this information. They have suppressed the history of true virile working class intersectional movements from time immemorial.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was. The thing I found interesting about I haven't read this book, but I know that it would have a tie-in to some of the issues around and I'm always gonna say this word wrong because my mouth doesn't let me say it, femininity. The feminine. I've been trying to get it. Because so the book that I haven't read, it's called Caliban and the Witch. Has anyone read that one?
I heard of that one. I heard about that one.
So I noticed when they were talking about okay, so the ruling class had to create this idea of femininity to move working women into the home and all of that. And I was just as I was reading, I was just ugh, this is the haunting specter of the book I haven't read. See, somebody else that I've had it on my shelf. And so one of the things I'm to understand that is in Caliban and the Witch is it talks about the gender divide, but in Europe and how I guess Sylvia Federici's conceit has something to do with men were given domination over women in the household to give them some form of domination as the ruling class dominated them. So it was just pulling women out of the workforce and making them housewives and convincing them that oh, this is what it means to be a woman was no more than more tricks and bullshit from the ruling class.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Someone's yeah, I appreciate y'all telling me now. See, I see I could go on something called Philosophy Tube video, Bread Tube. I know about Bread Tube and that it's just a baguette. Me and a dumb joke that I saw that one of you probably wrote. Oh yeah. So anyway, but yeah, a lot of this book reminded me of that because and I feel it touches on it with how Black women were present in the home and how that divide didn't really exist. But then it's just anyway. Now I'm getting off.
No, that's
point.
Interesting. That's
yeah. I really got to read that book. I really got to because I feel it would really tie into this. And something that I noticed was missing from this was wasn't the first strike in America a Black washerwoman's and then they made one of the first unions? Does anyone know about this? I feel
really?
I noticed that it wasn't mentioned, but it's definitely part of it.
That's wild. I didn't. Yeah, David Reckoning says it was one of them, one of the first. That's wild. Elijah says, wasn't that touched on in Settlers? It might have been. If one of y'all can crack open Settlers and look for that, let me know.
Settlers, the book that is this.
Yeah, just give it a crack. But to your point, Doja, the industrialization changing the concept of femininity, right? Which is something that is basically what we were talking about, right? The changing place of women in the home, where they, before industrialization, there was this home economy where people would make their own soap, their own rope, their own clothes, their own, bread, butter, everything, right? And then with industrialization, all this food gets made out of the house, and also goods start coming in, and so people have to have regular jobs. They have to, women either have to start doing work that is non-creative, like cleaning. And it's funny, at the end, we won't get into it too much, y'all, but in the end of the book, Angela Davis goes into this very thing, that cleaning is drudgery, and much of housework it absolutely does rob a person of their joy simply because of the nature of the work, that all of the creative work that used to be a part of work in the home was taken out. And there was this lack of sexual hierarchy. Of course, there was always, misogyny and male chauvinism, but it was not nearly so stratified as with the bourgeois revolution that happened and through industrialization. And in black culture, in the slave culture, there was none of this sexual hierarchy because the women worked and struggled as hard as the men. And so by nature, there was a completely different society as what was developing in the white world. So I that was the first time thank you, Afternoon Tune, I appreciate that. That was really the first time I had ever thought about that, as far as like, people talk about, we'll get to it in a second, but people from time immemorial have talked about how black culture has like I'm gonna say some stuff I'm gonna repeat some racist stuff in the stream, y'all. So it comes up in the book. Please don't think this is Gomer being racist. Anyway, but people saying things like, the lack of the father figure and stuff like that in black culture. And it's such a terrible racist trope that doesn't even make sense, because what black culture seems to have, and what I'm asking you if I'm reading this correctly from Angela Davis, was that the social structure is just different, and slaves actually found something that works. And then afterwards, even though white people tried so hard to destroy the family unit, black people found, decade after decade, found ways of reinventing the family unit, and in such a way as to stay alive. So I before we go on to the next slide, I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, I have so much I think about that. It's what it actually kind of reminds me of is like the conversations I've had with people about like when someone's like abolish the family or like whatever, and they like think it's like the super like I figured everything out like statement, and I'm just like, oh, what does that mean? They're just like, the standard nuclear family that we all know and like grew up with or like understand is like the like epitome of like being in a family or whatever. And I'm just like, you grew up with that? Like sure, I saw it on TV. I grew up in, I primarily like, again, like divorced, but like my dad and my stepmom, like I did grow up in like a 2-parent household, but also my parents were divorced and like whatever. So it's just like, but I grew up around people who were like raised by their grandparents, or like, they weren't actually, all of them weren't actually like siblings, but they were raised as siblings. I grew up with half siblings that I never actually referred to as my half siblings because that just wasn't the culture. So when I was reading this, I just felt really affirmed on that piece about like how like I never really thought of it as like cultural pieces, like a deep like Black cultural thing. I just thought we just did that so that people didn't feel bad. And then I figured out like, oh, that's actually like a widespread cultural like norm. And now I understand that it's like, it's from this. And so like even though I like know what a traditional family is, and I think there was of course once a time in my life that I aspired to that kind of partnership, but also I'm queer, so that complicates my like perspective on a lot of that. I never thought that being in a family was like an isolated, like unit, if that makes any sense. Because I, especially like being in New England now, I've noticed that when people mean like they're like immediate family, they mean like immediate, like just the people who live in your house. And I grew up in a culture where like on the weekends I was with my cousins. And I also spent my whole life having like cousins that I didn't know, that I'd never met. And then I'd like meet one of them like in high school and they'd be like, oh yeah, we're actually cousins. And I look at their face and I see that their face kind of looked like my face. And then they go to be like, yeah, because you're, your Uncle Maurice, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, you don't need to say a bunch of names to me.
I know all of them.
Yeah, like I believe you. If you say that we're cousins, I believe you, and that's enough, So like, yeah, I think it like actually brings me a lot of comfort to know that we figured out that the family, like nuclear family stuff was bullshit like from the jump.
200 years ago. Exactly.
Yes. And it really allowed us to be more like fully in community with each other. And I actually see that as one of the Black community's greatest strengths, is that like the barrier to being family is so low, and it's just really like open to everyone. Yeah, I mean, like I just didn't have that sort of upbringing where this was unusual. So yeah, so when I first encountered like, yeah, you know, like I said, like conversations, especially like when I knew a lot of like white anarchists about like abolish the family and they explain it, I just feel like, so you don't know about like Black people at all.
Shit. I mean, exactly. White people come up and be like, "Have y'all ever heard?" And Black people immediately are like, "Yes, we invented that 300 years ago." I'm gonna stop you right there.
Yeah, you know, it's like now I'm reading the chat. I kind of forgot. Like, I grew up with a cousin who, like, when she was 14, she got kicked out of like my aunt just like had enough of her, you know, like, and so she lived at our house, and that was just a normal thing that happened. Mm-hmm. And like, she could enroll in school fine. Like no one signed any legal paperwork. Now that I'm looking back, I'm like, definitely didn't sign any paperwork. Nothing changed mm-hmm. hands. And like, yeah, she was just there, and that was like fine and normal.
And you know, one thing that I think is important to note is that like that is resilient. That way of organizing the family is so much more resilient than the nuclear family. Like,
yeah. So one more thing I'll say mm-hmm. about it is it's interesting you say that. So like I had a brief stint in my life. I like I said it like that. I used to stay in this like religious children's home when I was a teen, and I was there for a year. And I remember that I was one of 2 Black children there. And I asked why that was. I had a house mother at the time, Miss Arlene. And I was just like, why are there no Black kids here? Like, what's going on? And she was just like, well, you know, when a kid has like problems in the home, like in your community, you know, y'all tend to just like send the kid to a relative. Like you never come here. And then I was like, why is my Black ass here? Which is very personal. But yeah, and it was so weird because the only other Black person there was actually like a distant relative of mine. So then I was just like, that's just creepy and weird. Wow. Our family is wrong and off. But like, yeah, I mean, like we had it. The thing that I always remember about it is that, like, you know, my cousin, when she lived with us, she was a family responsibility. Like, okay, she was having problems at her house, but that didn't mean that she went to like, they would always threaten military school, but she never went to military school. Like, she just shuffled around. My mom is one of 16 children, so there's also that. You always had a place to be if your parents did not want you. You just went all around town. So yeah, you know, and I always thought it was wonderful. You know, it's like I could visit one house like on a Sunday after church, and like the majority of my cousins be there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was hella dope. They would show me, you know, I watched Tales from the Hood when I was definitely too young.
That's amazing. I mean, that's beautiful. We just didn't have that, you know, and like white people most of the time have no idea what we're missing, you know, but I think back and I think of how deeply lonely my childhood was sometimes because white people do this thing where the quote unquote husband and the quote unquote wife become each other's best friends, quote unquote best friends, and then they don't have any more fucking friends at all, right? And so like you have to beg permission to go to friends' houses and stuff, and there's always just like this distrust of people outside the house, and so it's like it's this thing where like it is entirely needless and deeply isolating. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it actually kind of reminds me, and then I swear I'll stop telling stories from when I was young. When you were young, so because I went to an all-white school. But I went to an all-Black church, so it was like I was like 2 different people. Like it was a lot. But when I was 11, I had a sleepover. Like I had begged my parents for years, like, please let me have a sleepover. So it was for my birthday, and they told me that I could invite 5 girls from my church and 5 girls from my school.
All right.
And in the lead up to that, this pretty much meant 5 black girls, 5 white girls. That's
okay.
That's really what it was. That's what they were telling me. And my best friend at the time, her family actually, like, her dad was super racist. And he really said, like, of my family, he was just like, oh, you're the good ones. And I knew that was wrong. Like, I had enough sense that I was just like, this is, it's bad that he feels this way. But it was always said to me, like, well, he's allowed to feel how he feels. And, like, you should just be thankful that, like, he doesn't feel that way about your family.
What
so actually, yes, I remember that man. Like, he was, because this was my best friend.
Yeah.
So my best friend actually, she could only go to like the first 2 hours of my birthday because her dad was like, there are going to be other black children there. Like that. And so, you know, and it was like, even at 11, though we like didn't fully understand it. Like we understood enough that I was just like, oh, it makes sense that you can't actually sleep over because that's too much interaction with black people, like for your dad. But in that, I mean, it was just like this like intense fear of the other that he had, even though like our town was super small and it's just like, but still like there's that line was always there. Like people didn't really know each other in that way. I mean, like black folks knew who all the prominent white families were, but like, you know, no prominent white families would be bothered to learn the names of anyone, even if they were like their housekeeper or something.
It's true.
But yeah, I remember noticing that like my white friends lived a very like if it wasn't soccer or like dance or like someone you knew from an activity or church, like you didn't like they didn't know people the way that like I knew people. And I always felt, not gonna lie, a little bad for them because like I had hella fun. I had hella cousins. I had like hella community members. They're having a good ass time. So.
Yep. Exactly. Okay. Awesome. So we are gonna move on to slide 2. Oh, beans. Hold on. Yes. There we go. Okay. Slide 2. Standards for a new womanhood. So we've already talked about most of this, so we can actually probably click through this slide. But there have been a lot of racist studies that have come up, such as the Moynihan report that says slavery destroyed the black family. Oh shit! Hold on. All right, y'all, hold on a second. Still on stream. I heard shuffling at the door. I didn't know you were going out.
Still on stream. You just decided to lock me out.
Yes, exactly. Watch this.
You're dumb.
All right, hold up, because I'm going back on stream. Oh boy, here we go. All right. Yeah, y'all are peeping, Elijah. All right, I'm sorry, Doja Bird. We got some groceries, and I wasn't sure if I needed to grab them or if my partner needed to grab them. So, Elijah, I can't do quick draw right now. We just had a huge interruption. Hold on, let's see if I can shoot Smith. I'm gonna see if I can shoot Smith from here. You better not! Hey, put a bottle up on the top. I'm gonna do quick draw. Alright. Get one of them empty bottles down there.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Alright. Here we go, y'all. Quick draw. Let's see let's see if I can do it in one. Nope. Oh no. Oh no, terrible.
Like
oh God. Doja, don't look at this. You gonna revoke my shooter card?
I probably
yeah.
There we go. There we go.
I was gonna say, do I need to put it on my head?
Making a mockery of myself. Yes, I am. Doja knows how to shoot way better than I do. I guarantee you that.
We'll see. You know, I'm still training to become an instructor, so I feel like I do. But then I go to the range and I'm just like, I ain't got it. Those ammo prices have been impossible, so it's made it really impossible to train. You know, like it's very sad. Probably we have a little like Fisher Price like looking gun. I call it Fisher Price, but it's not. Fisher Price wouldn't make like a toy gun, but we use it for our instruction classes, and it does shoot like little like darts, but not good. And it's also not that good of like a training gun, but it does help people with like their grip.
Yeah, I really should work on my grip, but this is also really not a very good training gun.
I can imagine not. You know, it's like we did. I was just like, can we just get a Nerf gun? And then we looked at them. We were just like, oh, actually, the anatomy of a Nerf gun has nothing to do with a full firearm at all. Fun fact. Like, wouldn't have thought it.
So funny. All right. Yes, thank you. Yeah, let me get some quick draws in the chat in celebration of how great I did. Thank you so much, everybody. Okay. Thank you, Iron Cankle. I appreciate that. That's what every man should do for their partner. You should see if you could help your partner. Don't just be a dickhole and sit on the couch. So what we were talking about before I decided to stand up was how racist all these studies were on, like every study that has ever been a study on black culture and black people, basically, from psychology to health studies, has been deeply tinged with racism. But one of the things that Angela Davis particularly notes is the Moynihan Report, which allegedly is trying to show how, black people's families have been destroyed, and, there's slavery was just a complete destruction of black culture. And of course, in many ways, there were so many things that were taken, but like y'all persevered, and the studies completely ignore the new cultures that you built and the ways in which you persevered.
Yeah, it's amazing because the studies are just like, why don't black people do things? Like, isn't it terrible and bad that black people don't do thing? And it's just like, how did you make that my fault? It's like one of the things I thought was like particularly amazing was like the whole conceit around like, oh, the black father isn't in the home because like black women are so like matriarchal and stuff. But then it's just like, okay, but you look at it's like, so you did slavery where you like took children from people and like all manner of like BS, and then like you also like, I mean, like white slave owners like raped slave women and like made more people like Thomas Jefferson. I mean, do you think Thomas Jefferson took full advantage of his visitation time? I don't think so.
I mean, really? Yep.
And that's our fault now. Like,
yes, exactly. That is something that I wanted to hit home on this particular slide, is this idea that they paint everything as they don't have any view of history whatsoever. Everything is immediate, and because they're only looking at this immediate thing, they can treat it as a quote unquote pathology and never look at a reason for it whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And it's just it's like, how did they even get away with that?
They still do.
Baffling. Yeah, it's like part of me is just like baffled to read it because it makes sense when Angela Davis lays it out. And what I really appreciate about Dr. Davis's work is that like I struggled like a lot with text, especially if it's something written before 1960. I get real caught up, y'all. Like I'm actually just now like doing like the bigger political education pieces because when I read Lenin, like my brain doesn't understand what's happening there. And like when I read Dr. Davis, I'm just like, this is so simple. Like, how did she manage to explain this thought to me in a way that was like easily digestible? Like, it's not even so much as like, I know we were talking about like, she doesn't pull any punches, but she's not even punching. She's just like, like you like aside, and she's just like talking to you real, like like firmly, and she's just like, this is wrong, and I'm gonna like tell you like that it's wrong. I the way that I like feel her work, I feel it very much. It's like I'm sitting at a table and like someone has like made me a meal and is talking to me like in the way that like when we could have people over to our houses once upon a time, like you would sit. I mean, like some of the best political conversations I've ever been part of were like, you know, just sitting in one of those like what are those like bullshit lawn chairs? Someone posted a picture of one the other day on Twitter and was like, remember when you like sit in these in a backyard like having a beer? And I'm just like, I do remember that. Like I want to go back to that. And I think that like Davis, like she talks like that. Like she talks like she's just like, I'm gonna tell it to you real plain and simple. And I'm like, I need that. Like, please.
Exactly.
And you see how plain and simple it is to explain. So this knowledge wasn't hidden from us because it's like complicated. Like people always want to talk about like, well, this situation's really complicated. We can't teach this thing and that thing. It's just too complex. It's not. She tell it plain right here.
Exactly.
Like, and I have very little, again, I'm speaking as someone like very little like formal political education. Like I read this and this makes sense. And, you know, I've shared a little bit about like my background and like how I was taught in the US school system. So we're not learning, you know, it's like they're purposefully like hiding this. And I think that that's important to, you know, like name.
Absolutely.
Because like clearly there's something in this work still that is like incendiary. Otherwise, we would be reading pieces of this in high school, and we're not. You know,
exactly. That's such a good point. Because it's so easy to understand. I mean, when I was the thing that kept stopping me as I was reading this book was not that it was a single hard concept. It was that it was so much. It was so hard on my heart to continue to read some of these chapters that I had to put it down a couple of times. You know what I mean? Like, I was talking to Chantilly a little bit about this, you know, and I mean, it's fire on pages, you know, but, okay. So that's basically that. So let's talk about the anti-slavery movement and the birth of women's rights. Y'all about to find out some shit.
Oh my
God. Industrialization, like we said a little while ago, moved production out of the home and gave rise to this idealized wife and mother. So much of this stuff that gets taught as quote-unquote culture, as quote-unquote tradition, is made up within a couple of generations. And this shows it very clearly that so much of the concept of like the filial wife and mother, it has no basis in antiquity. It is something that was made up in capitalism. Like under capitalism, this shit was made up. And it was made up for very specific reasons that related to misogyny and racism that absolutely fed into capital. So before the, I'm just going to read through the slide and then we could talk, if that's all right, Doja Bird.
Yeah.
So before the 1800s, there was no marriage as oppression type concept. Like, yeah, bad things happen in marriages. And yes, like, I mean, women, okay, because let me back up and say, like, yes, women could be sold into marriage and stuff back in the day, of course. But this specific concept of marriage as slavery doesn't come up so often. And part of the reason is that, you know, is the way that the home was organized, where, you know, the everybody had like a real productive job that was valuable. And so you can't, if someone has a valuable productive job, you cannot treat them really terribly like that, right? Yeah. Because they'll just fucking leave. So white women of all classes, as soon as this like really oppressive stuff started being brought into the culture, they start seeing the need for political power. And exactly, T-Griff, the 1950s housewife has zero historical basis. That is not how history was. The wife of the 1700s was not a 1950s housewife in any way. But women originally were not invited to like abolition movement meetings, but they became fierce fighters for it because these working class women especially saw these links being formed between the way that black people were treated, the way women were beginning to be treated, right? Like all these things had to do with each other. And so they started fighting it all very hard, and it prepared them for the suffrage movement that comes a little bit later, that we'll get into in the next couple slides. But I just I do want to take 1 second and get your opinion, Doja Bird, on like this concept of how history gets rewritten quite a bit, and if you see this kind of idea coming up in some of your other studies, because I mean you're better read than I am in a lot of ways. So do you see this idea? Or is this something that like Angela Davis is kind of like opening up and exposing, or is this something that comes up in a lot of what you read?
I think that this comes up a good bit. I think it all like really connects to this idea. This is like maybe a little like of a like high level thought, but I was thinking about this because so I was thinking about Black womanhood like a lot, because I was preparing for like this stream, and I had a friend like say some really like deep thoughts to me about being agender, and I was just like, that resonates with me actually, because I was reading this and I was thinking about like how much of the idea of womanhood is just like fictitious, like ruling class garbage, and I was especially, I don't know, like in thinking about that, I was just like, well, I was just like, well, am I a woman then if I recognize that like this gender construct, like, yes, okay, like womanhood was denied me, like the whole thing about like Sojourner Truth, like, again, like the ain't I a woman thing. But like, do I want womanhood is like a question that I come back to a good bit, because but then it's like also like my womanhood is not separate from my Blackness, and so like I feel very sure that I am a Black woman. So I'm still in that process of like questioning some of the pieces around like, well, what makes me a woman? And I was interested. It was like really interesting to read in that last chapter that we'll like chat about a bit, about what I felt were like real parallels between like the idea of motherhood being like the like birthing of children and the raising of children, specifically man like children, and like how the like rabid white supremacists like suffragettes like really like leaned into that. And a lot of that felt like eerily similar to a lot of TERFs and how they perceive of womanhood, because like it had a lot of the same arguments. And as someone who is like, I'm a mom, I've given birth, it was a whole thing. I don't feel like so attached to that, but I definitely have, I again in this text, and then in the conversations I'm like always reading, I'm trying to figure out, like I was reading an article about like TERFs and like why it's so popular in England and stuff, and so I had just read that this week, and I was just like, it's so weird. So it's like, I don't know, I'm always thinking about like this like question of like womanhood, and of course like Black womanhood, and how it in so many ways it's just very different than how like white women conceptualize. And yeah, like you were saying, like these white women, I won't even get to that. Next point.
This is such an interesting idea, though, and I don't know if I've really thought too much about it in relation to masculinity. As far as I've never had much of a gender crisis of my own, but I suppose there's something worth looking at where, like, what does it mean to be a white man? And so much of what it means is not something that I want to be a part of. Now, that doesn't mean that I can just, like, so many white people like have this idea of like, oh, well, I reject all that, so I have abolished my own whiteness, and you can't do that, right?
We did it.
Yeah, mission accomplished.
We did it. Yeah, I mean, but you make a really good point, because I was thinking about this the whole time I was reading this, about how, like, one of the biggest parts of most of what we've read is about how like white women are pitted against Black people, like in this like quest for the vote. But then I look at that and I'm just like, well, shit, is the vote really all that? Like, what are white men doing with the vote? Bullshit. And it's amazing to me how much of like reform or just like I shouldn't like hate on like I was gonna say like DSA like talking points are this idea like that white men are the bar of like this is what a free person looks like. This is a liberated person like right here. And I think a place where that really fails is knowing any white man ever.
Yes, damn.
And so it's like, and this is why, you know, it's like the Kambayu like River Collective was talking about collective liberation. And the reality is that like white men are not free either. And I mean, like you get into toxic masculinity and the conversations that just aren't happening. And then like I see on Twitter, you know, like the really insufferable like white guy like socialist types, and it's just like I wish that you could just be like, do you see the ways in which you're like this world sucks even for you? You're not having a good time. The reason you're not having a good time is that like, you know, the world is so atomized. You don't have any real friends. Like you like have a very limited like you actually have like really limited prospects as well. Like I don't know. I mean like I get really like caught up when people are like, oh, well, white guys have it, so I must want it. I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. White guys wear deck shoes. Those aren't good. I don't want to wear those. Like, and yeah, and at to our point earlier about like the Black family and how like beautiful that is. I just really reject the idea that like white guys have like stuff that I mean, y'all have stuff that I want in a resource way, but as far as like community and all that shit, like no.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Ain't that exactly what Lenin says in the beginning? I mean, in the beginning of State and Revolution, he's like, you know, the capitalist is may command more power on the earth than a tribal chief, but the capitalist envies even the lowest tribal chief of the respect that they get from their community. And I mean, isn't that how it is? Like, you know, yeah, white people may have resources and we may get money and we may fucking have privileges out the yin yang, you know, we don't even think about. But yeah, community and I mean, like that matters. Yeah.
Like that's like the people were talking about Get Out, you know, because like that show them like premiered, which I'm never gonna watch. I appreciate that everyone has told me that it is horrible garbage, but they were talking about how like, you know, the actual terror of Get Out is the sunken place, and like. But you know, it was like, and I was actually talking to my husband about this. So my husband is white, so that's where I get a lot of my like white guys ain't doing so hot. Like I study y'all, you know, I'm deep in the study. It's like when Dave Chappelle said, "I'm doing the study on white people." I really took that to heart. But like he was just like, well, do you think that like white people would really like want to like become Black people? I was just like, well, in Get Out, like. It's, you know, Lakeith Stanfield's like character, but he's like surrounded and like protected in whiteness, and they all know that he's actually a white guy, but he gets to like wear a cool hat and like whatever other bullshit that actual white guy that's in there gets to do. And so I was arguing, I was just like, yeah, if you could keep all of the like privileges of whiteness, because again, like most white people don't know that those are privileges of whiteness, and also be a cool Black guy, like why wouldn't y'all? Like but like so much of the like perceived, I mean like the like coolness of being Black is actually it's because of the community. So in that it wouldn't work. You couldn't, I don't think you could really do all that. But anyway, yeah, like I was thinking about that a lot.
It's good. Get Out. Somebody in the chat said, and that perfectly explains cultural appropriation, right? It's why it's both so harmful and hurtful, and also why white people just cannot stop doing it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like, gosh, to get out of just like the monotony of whiteness. Like, again, my of course my in-laws are white, and sometimes, I mean, like, I just sit there and I'm just like, why are we doing this? And they're just like, it's a tradition, and I'm just like, so you have like the worst food on Thanksgiving, tradition, like what are y'all doing? It's just like it's watching people just like go through the motions of something but never think too deeply about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it is extremely perplexing to me. Like I said, I'm doing a whiteness study.
Good luck, Doja.
And what's amazing is how easily I can disrupt that. Like all I have to do is like tell a joke, and it just like or I don't know, not follow the rules of like we put the dishes away after dinner at this point and then we have wine. If I just like go and just like pour a glass of wine when a certain plate is still out there, like the rules. Oh God. Like, it's just it's and there's so much of it. I thought I was white people, but now I know like New England white people, and it is a level. I don't know what is happening here. It was like the very Puritan, like IDK, like.
Oh my God, I went to I'm gonna keep this short, but I went to my girlfriend in high school. We did this big tour around the U.S. Like we just lived in our cars and we like ate fucking bread and peanut butter sandwiches, and we just drove around the U.S. for like a month. It was really cool. But we went and visited her family and my family, and when we were in New England, it was the only time in the whole trip that I was sitting around and I was like, this whole house feels weird as fuck. like all the very old kind of feeling to it, and it's like the doors were black, and like the color scheme was just kind of like different, and none of the doors had locks, but it was very, and like the way that people talked, and it was all very like, they were friendly enough, I guess, but it was very like stultified, and I was like, y'all give me the fucking creeps. Like,
I mean, it's like there's no new culture really coming into whiteness. When I first got on Twitter, someone was sharing like it was, gosh, it might have been like the women's march that they still are doing. I don't know. I haven't followed up with that. And someone had a Hamilton like themed poster. And I was just like, Hamilton is really old. I remember turning to my husband, I was just like, why are they still like putting like pussy hats on the Schuyler sisters from Hamilton? Like that was a very long time ago.
That's hilarious.
Like it was popular when I was pregnant. So like and I was late. So I know that like it is cool. And my husband was just like, well, the thing that you don't understand about white people is that we live in a stagnant culture. So like
that's all we got.
It was like we look to you to tell us what new cool things are. And
oh no!
I was like, if Lin-Manuel Miranda isn't making new cool stuff for us to take, then like, and like we don't have anything else. We're not going to come up with it ourselves, now are we? And I was just like, what is that like? Like we're like just nothing getting in there. Like that sounds very sad.
Doja, I didn't know you came on stream to kill us.
I'm so sorry. I have so many observations about white people because I'm so fascinated by it. Because like I think and this is like one more thing I'll say, and then we should probably, I don't know, do some slides, but like also, but it is present in text too. You see the way that like the white women, the suffragettes center fear and like in all of their movements. So like their fear is like, well, what if the Negro gets the vote and then we don't get the vote? And there's this scarcity mindset, right? Like that only so many votes are available. And like, but that's not true. All of these people could vote. Every last one of them. Black people, white women. No one is limiting the amount of votes except the ruling class. But you see them even when like, they're talking nice to Frederick Douglass and they might agree like on a like individual level. They're so afraid that they're going to lose the footing that they have, that they make all of these concessions. And that's 100% rooted in fear Oh, yeah, yes. Oh my gosh. I'm just looking at the chat about Beyonce. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling the truth here, Doja. It's such good stuff. God, fuck, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I love this about deep level trauma and white people. I mean, this is the thing that I always say is that, like, there's no way that white people did a heckin' colonialism, like, without internalizing some really awful things about, like, the human condition.
Of course.
And they're everywhere. I mean, it's like, have you ever had a conversation about Lord of the Flies? I read that when I was in high school, and it was like, Lord of the Flies is about human nature. If left to our own devices, we will murder each other over a conch shell. Like, okay, so that book is literally about a bunch of, like, private white, like, British children getting shipwrecked. I have nothing in common with those children.
Yeah.
Like, not a goddamn thing. So how can you tell me that that's human nature? But I think that it's like, white folks had to internalize this, like, universal truth about being human in order to subjugate other people. And, like, you can't tell me that, like, white folks have come out of that fine.
No, I mean, Fanon talks about that all the time in Wretch of the Earth, how the colonizer is deeply psychologically scarred by the things that they do, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing, it's like, and you can see it in how it's like, sometimes you talk to someone about, like, well, okay, why are you doing that? And they have no actual clue. You know, it's like, I don't think that people are, like, I don't think a lot of white people are, like, malicious. I think that they're just not intentional. Everything is, I think especially white folks have a culture of, like, being reactionary. And so you're just constantly responding to, like, all of this stimuli that's, like, everywhere. And there isn't a culture for, like, hold up, slow down. Because speeding up, accelerating, being busy, being into everything has always served capitalism and white supremacy. So, like, why would you do it now?
Hell yeah. So, next slide.
Next slide.
We got class and race in the early women's rights campaign. So, Frederick Douglass was a staunch supporter, and I think it's fascinating that Angela Davis really calls out how W.B. Du Bois and Frederick Douglass were these hardcore, feminists in many ways, and so many of the white men weren't. And I don't think she's just talking shit on white men here. I think she's she's pointing out a very important historical fact that, like, people who understand subjugation would work for others who have been oppressed like they have, even at possibly their own. Like, there was this whole thing with Frederick Douglass, right, of, like, eventually he says, look, black people need to vote first because of the way these lynch mobs are forming, but before that he's fighting for suffrage, you know. So anyway, read through this slide. Key ideas from Elizabeth Cady Stanton in the Seneca Falls Declaration. Now, this is worth talking about, even though Elizabeth Cady Stanton was problematic in so many ways. Yeah. So, marriage robbed women of property rights and physical autonomy. Like, a husband could beat their wife, punish their wife however they want, and divorce was entirely biased towards a man. Higher education and all wealth, all higher paying jobs, etc., was completely barred from women. And this was the first time that many of these feminist ideas had been put into print in the United States, and I think even in a lot of ways in the world. Not to say that this concept of, like, women's rights was an entirely new concept, but it was a new concept within the milieu of capitalism, and all prominent white suffragettes and abolitionists, both the white abolitionists and the white suffragettes, were all against class struggle. And this is exactly what Doja Bird was talking about earlier, is this fact that is very interesting. When the petty bourgeoisie lead a movement, they are going to be anti-class struggle every single time. And there's so much to unpack here. So feel free to just jump in, Doja Bird.
Oh my god!
But
like, that's the guy's name, William Lloyd Garrison. I always forget it because yeah, he was like a really intense abolitionist, I believe, here in Boston, and like ran a paper and like
racist.
the anti-union and
Yeah.
like. It's like, you know, I'm like, make it make sense, but it does make sense for the thing that you just said. You know, it's like, is that and once you read something like this, you understand like so much of the like current organizing, like and then I highlighted here. Oh my gosh, it's on my page 51, but like they were talking about oh my gosh, like Frederick Douglass even wrote in this thing, like the rights of women in respect to political rights, we hold women to be justly entitled to all we claim for men. So again, the bar, men. That's it. That's where we're sitting. And another thing I thought was like interesting about this section, it was like a little note, but I was just like, was like when Elizabeth Stanton like had Frederick Douglass speak and like how you know, like the press like really slammed them for this. I was thinking about like how often, you know, in our organizing or like just like Twitter conversations, because now I know about those, we talk about like being palatable for like especially like the white working class or something like that, and it's like, oh, this isn't popular, but that it's our responsibility to push liberation, and when an issue is unpopular, like do what we can to make it popular. And so like, yeah, even though Elizabeth Cady Stanton was like, she didn't get it all right, like she did give Frederick Douglass like space, and even when that was backfiring, like, and then you see like so much of this text is like about it gets into like this happened and then this backfired and people said this thing about that thing, and so you see that what I find amazing is like the push and pull, and which like historical figures like succumb to that over time and like make those concessions, how those concessions are exactly why we're where we are today.
Yes.
And that was really like, that's why I don't read this book and I don't feel sad about it. I read this book as like, okay, this is actually, we've done this. We've done this back and forth. Like there's no need for us to do this, because at the end of the day, it's the ruling class that creates these like bullshit like conditions. And like what we should do different is actually like delve into it, because as someone was saying earlier in the chat, talking about like white people don't have a concept of real talk. You can't tell me that these like old school like suffragettes, like even though they talk about conversations they had, most of the talking is really happening through these resolutions and very formal letters. They're not actually like sitting in a room and being like, all right, we disagree, let's figure out like what the path forward is. And I think that because that never happened, you got all this like this bullshit is because like none of that ever happened. And so I think it's like something that we're actually doing is we are gathering in rooms and having these really tough conversations. So in that way, we're doing better than them.
Damn.
Actually.
That's fat. That is such an interesting idea, Doja Bird. The idea that like these difficult conversations that we have that like in many ways, you know, break apart groups on a regular basis. It's really like it's our experiencing real talk for the first time. And so like, of course there's going to be struggle. Of course there's going to be people who can't deal with it, because experiencing something that intimate and deep for the first time has got to be really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's why I really like the work of just like getting to sit with people and listen to people and like figure out where people are at, because like, I think that that's something that we're just doing so radically different. I think like the only other movement in this nation's history that actually had that was, you know, some elements of like the Southern Freedom Movement, Civil Rights Movement, like that was like multiracial and like anti-racist. And I mean, actually, yeah, there were other anti-racist movements, right? so like, but I think that that's like a key element, like actually being able to like sit and share space. And that's why even something like this is so, just us like sitting on a stream, like even though we're like time zones away, is actually like not something that the ruling class wants happening. So
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah, I like yeah, Chantilly, yeah, like the Treadmill of Reform. Yes.
Yes. That's what
yes. I mean, like I was even in reading this, I was thinking about like, you know, as a queer person, like again, I worked for the Obama campaign in 2008, so like I was like part of marriage equality. Like I remember when that was like the issue that was this close to everyone's faces, and like we had to do this, and it's like, but marriage equality is still reform, and it hasn't actually like solved a lot. It hasn't solved, you know, like discrimination against LGBTQ people, but it was definitely like, I don't know if anyone else on the stream was like present in the political like sphere like at that time, but it was such a big deal. And it was so weird because like Obama didn't even actually support it. He was also civil union, same as McCain, but I remember actually being told that like I was not to tell people that. Like because I worked at campaign office, they were like just and so it was like somehow this really big issue, but neither presidential candidate was actually going for it. And I don't even know what all that was.
It's wild. Shit. Okay. So what about working women? And this is something we was talking about a second ago, that working women are conspicuously missing from this proto-suffrage movement. But they were striking and protesting 10 years earlier. And most of that is because working women were doubly taken advantage of by the capitalist system, specifically because they were women. And like one of the things I thought was so interesting about this is Angela Davis breaks down misogyny and lynching in such a way that shows it's not just male supremacy. It's not just white supremacy for the psychological benefit alone. It is supported. It is, in fact, it is even financially supported by the capitalists of the time as a means for keeping down the price of labor. And, you know, Angela Davis, I feel like, goes into again and again how, like, yeah, there was a bunch of, like, the field overseer types doing lynchings. But they weren't just doing it by themselves. There was capital backing it. And the same thing with these women. There was capital fighting against the suffrage movement in many ways because these women were just cheaper labor, right? As long as women could be treated badly, they could be paid less. And I just think it's so interesting because the bourgeois women, they just miss it. They just don't fucking see it at all.
Yeah, I mean, like, their big thing is like, I went to a really fancy school and now I have to sit in the parlor all my days. Like,
yeah, it's like, it's disconnected from reality.
This is slavery. It's just, and the thing that like, I find like, it's like I can see how they could think that, you know, it's like, I try to be really empathetic. I'm like, okay, I can see how if you've never struggled, if you've never experienced this a day in your life, that this is hard for you, you know, like I can see that. However, what the fuck? Like, and they're like, I don't get to use my fancy education and I have to like do this. It's just like, oh, drudgery. Oh, you hate that? Like, oh, I mean, and what it also reminded me of is, you know, it's like, I really dislike the term wage slavery. Like it because like, I mean, and I'm sure people know like all the arguments about like wage slavery. I don't like say anything when someone uses it because I understand what they're getting at, right? Like working for low wages and being compelled to do so by the system feels like slavery. I think that there are some differences that are important in that. So it to me, it's not unlike when these white women are like, I am being oppressed. It's like, you are, and then they're like, it is like slavery. I'm like, okay, you're gonna need to step back all the way here. It's like, but we see that it's like that conflation of oppressions is really, I think it's like, I don't know how much of it is related to like this. It's just like all oppression has to be the same, or it like has to be equal to whatever is like the oppression du jour. Like you have to like make your oppression like, this is just, it's like a black person gets killed by the police and it's just like, this is just like when black people, and I'm like, no, whatever the thing you were about to say, it is not just like, it's not just like, it is a different thing that is also super important, and I really want to treat it with the importance that it deserves, but I really don't need you to go, this is just like really egregious thing. I'm just like, or like, this is just like a thing that is not like actually at all. Like oppressions are all different. We have all the time in the world to talk about them. Actually, there is no need for you to make like a really like cut, like just like, but like these white women did because they saw all the momentum that like, you know, I mean, some of them were abolitionists, like they were very against slavery. And so they were just like, this thing is also like slavery, because that like gets people like in the door to understanding it, I guess.
But it also completely like just any black person who hears that is going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's like, you know, when I'm reading the parts about like, you know, Ida B. Wells and like some of the other like black women who are in like the suffragist like realm, I'm just like, how did they even get through all of that?
It's patience, like, incredible deep patience.
So look, Ida had the Winchester rifle. She was ready for something, you know.
Like, I will kill you. I can kill you, but I won't.
I will kill Susan. One of these days I'm gonna get her. Like, but today I'm gonna let her talk all this stuff to my face. Like, sometimes, like in reading that section, I could just feel. I felt like I could feel the spirit of Ida B. Wells just being like, that ain't it. That ain't it, sis. They go.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, absolutely. Real quick, because this is a very important topic. Sojourner Truth, with the whole "Ain't I a Woman" speech, right? Saving a convention, basically, because all these men were getting up and they were hooting and hollering and throwing stones and shit, and Sojourner Truth by herself saves this convention, and there were white women trying to stop her from speaking the second day, right? There were white women who, like, it's so funny how often we get in our way, right? It's not just that Sojourner Truth was saying good things. It's not just that Sojourner Truth was like, you know, wow, doing a good job. She saved the convention, right? It was being overrun by men, and by herself, this incredibly strong woman comes up and is just like, all y'all sit the hell down. I'm about to tell y'all something, right? And these white women can't stand it. And when I read about the Ida B. Wells versus Susan B. Anthony thing, it's the same. It's like I know that Susan B. Anthony, even the way that Angela Davis paints her, and in fact, let me just go to the next slide because I think we get to that. Yeah. Susan B. Anthony paints, or Angela Davis paints her as this person who made a Faustian bargain, you know, kind of a deal with the devil to let racism in. But what I read when I was reading this was, you know, Ida B. Wells really trying with Susan B. Anthony. In fact, trying so much that eventually she had to go overseas to tell her story. You know what I mean? Like, she had to go to fucking England to tell her story.
Yeah. And I mean, it really shows. I mean, it's like, it seems like they were close, right? I mean, as close as, but then I say, as close as a white woman of that, like, social, like, order and a black woman could be for that time. And so, like, sometimes I'm just like, did Ida Wells ever just, like, read her for filth? Like, just, like one good time? Like, could she do that? And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure she knew she couldn't. You know, it's like, but and I mean, so much of it is like, you know, I think even Davis cautions a little bit about like the putting everything on, like, you know, on Susan B. Anthony's back, like her individual, you know, it's like individually she like was not like racist, but she made these concessions. But I mean, how many people do we know that are kind of like that? You know, like, or
so many,
right? Who kind of talk to you, and it's always that very pragmatic like stance where it's like, we're gonna get this, we're doing this. I have a long view. I promise racism, I'll never let that happen. Like, I'm just organizing for a time with this group, and then, but it never goes that way, right? And so I think that was something that was like really significant to me. And it reminded me a lot of like this whole, because it's talked about a little bit, but mostly around like white women and like this idea of like salvation, right? Like salvation of like the like white race. But like how many narratives even now in like reform conversations are like, it's like you have like black women in the mix who like endorse those points for the like ruling class. You know, it's like I think about like how Stacey Abrams was so celebrated, and then like now I don't even know what homegirl's doing. Like,
yeah,
and you get those little like uplifts, like look, here's a black woman come to like save the day kind of thing. And like our political, I don't know, like our political climate has always like wanted some of that. Like, and so I wonder how much of like Susan B. Anthony's like interactions with Ida B. Wells are just like, and I say this as like a black woman who has spent like, I basically worked my whole life in like the like nonprofit like sector, and like I wish I could get out, but I think I'm kind of stuck in it now. And like I have had conversations like that with white women where they're like, no, trust, like, you know, like I'm here for it. As y'all were saying, Beyonce, they'd be like, let's get information. And then like next thing you know, you just been dropped off. Oh my God. Like, yes, I'll never forget when a white woman said, get information to me. And I was just like, I was just like, I know empowerment, womanhood, all that. I was like, but I don't think you should say that. And she was just like, you know, you're right. I think I shouldn't say that. I was like, see, did it kind of feel wrong when you did it? Just a little bit. Like, I was like, I don't know. Why did I have to tell her that? She must have known that it wasn't right before I said open my mouth. Like,
she's like, I'm gonna try this out.
I'm gonna try and see if she says anything. You knew I had to say something. It was Beyonce. Come on.
So funny. Oh man. I mean, I laugh, but I'm sure I've done that before.
Where's Cory Booker? Where is Cory Booker with his light eyes? Where has he been?
I don't know. So
they brought all those people out, and I haven't seen them since. You know, like,
I agree. I mean, and that's what's so telling, right? Is that like they, in many ways, regardless of how you feel about the Democratic Party, you can say that like getting black people on board with Joe Biden was critical to his win. And so they absolutely, they used, you know, they did what they did, and then threw them away, you know?
Yeah. And it's like, and I think the point that's like really interesting is, you know, it's like we have people telling us today, like, oh, I know you want to like abolish the police, but first we need to do these other things. And it's just like, now I know from reading this right here that you always say, I need to do this one thing first real quick. And then you just never get around. You just never actually come to nothing ever really comes to fruition. Like, it's just the reforms the treadmill. Like I always say.
Yeah, like Chantilly said, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to tell you all a little bit about racism in the women's suffragette movement. So the Northern capitalists really wanted to control the politics of the nation. Like Lenin talks a lot about the 1,000 threads between the government and industry, and this is where it comes out. It is when they, like, capitalists literally sit down and say, okay, how are we going to control things like votes? How are we going to control things like legislation? Like, what's the narrative that's going to be pushed for the next couple of years that people are going to fight about? And so what they did is they say, let's get black men the vote. Let's get black men the vote so that in the South, we, the industrialists of the North, can control the South. And this is one of the interesting ways where, like, my history teacher, my racist little history teacher in middle school, when she called it the War of Northern Aggression, it's like, if she would have understood that, like, she was almost there, that it was, you know what I mean? That it was like, yes, absolutely, it was Northern capitalists trying to control politics and thereby throwing fuel on this fire. But it was also people wanting to own slaves. So it was, it's
like multiple things can be true about a thing.
Exactly.
Did you know?
Exactly.
No.
So yeah, the Northern capitalists are like, they're funding in many ways a a Get Black Men the Vote campaign, and so the racists of the South are being courted by the women's movement, so that they can, so that the women could potentially get the vote first. And it's just like, you were saying, Doja Bird, that it's just so ignorant that, like, yeah, everybody could just, like, if we just sat back, everybody could have the vote. This is not a battle, right? You're being tricked into thinking this is a battle. So anyway, the racism starts creeping in, and there's a lot of racists whispering in the ear of Susan B. Anthony, who's kind of taken over from Elizabeth Cady Stanton at this point. And they start using this term political expediency. And it's the bullshit that, you were just talking about, as far as like, let's do this first. It doesn't mean anything. It's literally just saying, you sit down and be quiet. And these racist mobs start doing systematic lynching. So lynching was not like random acts. They always painted it as like, oh, white people just got real upset one day and they went out and started doing lynchings. It's not how it worked, right? Lynchings were, certainly they could be like random acts of violence, but the point was that they were ubiquitous, and they were oftentimes specifically reactions to black people trying to get their rights. And so whenever there would be a demonstration, or whenever there would be a walkout or something like that, then a lynching would oftentimes be sure to follow in short order. So Frederick Douglass begins to say, like someone said in the chat, when women start being killed for being women, when they start being hung for being women, then we can start worrying as much about women. But for right now, black people are experiencing this, right? And Susan B. Anthony comes back and says, I will cut off my arm before I work for the rights of the black person, she didn't say black person, and not the woman. And so it's reading this, I was like, holy shit, right? I was like, Susan B. Anthony talk like that? Like Susan B. Anthony, like just straight up, like actual.
She's so celebrated. So it's like, it's really shocking to see how she really was. And so it's just like, and it's hard, it's like, women now, they still go to her grave and put their like, I voted sticker like on it. And it's just like,
go ahead, y'all. I can't say shit. I'm a white man. I can't say shit, but still, it just seems, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Susan B. Anthony after reading this.
Yeah, the thing that the expediency piece was something that I kept coming back to, because what it really reminded me of was, so like, people are always like, okay, dismantle white supremacy. And again, like, as a black woman who's worked in the nonprofit space for so long, it's just like, I have had the experience of working somewhere where they're like, okay, you want to dismantle white supremacy, but then they do all the white supremacist shit. Mm-hmm. And so then you're just like, well, fuck, is it my responsibility to like point out when that's happening? But one of the things that like most folks learn when you're like learning about like white supremacy culture, it's the sense of urgency, like is a big one. And I tend to be the person who call this one out more than any other like vestige of white supremacy. It's like, we have to have a thing done. We have to have, and I'm like, no. I'm just like sometimes when you're trying to break that cycle, people don't even realize that they're doing it. They're just like, this has to happen. I'm just like, well, what happens if it doesn't happen? And they're like, hellfire and damnation upon everything we've ever built here. And I'm just like, no, I think it'll just not happen. And like, that'll be it. And that's it. But you see that sense, I feel like it's like situations like this are probably why sense of urgency ended up on the white supremacy culture like list in the first place. It's like that they're just like responding. And like, everything's like, it's just like, it's this like moving train, like this is actually, the moving train was something that I had a white woman supervisor who would say that to me. And because I specifically work in comms. So like people are always like, oh, communications, it's a moving train. You have to do, and I often actually do like crisis communications. And so I'm just like, no, actually it's not. I'm like, why is the train moving when we're trying to build stuff? Could we stop the train? Is that not an option? And you just see like the deer in the headlights look of like, what do you mean stop the train? I'm like, so in this analogy, the trains can be turned off. Like you do know, but it's like when you actually do work slow, like, well, I say intentionally, and I don't say slow and intentionally, because I think that's also like a false dichotomy where it's like, if work is intentional, then it's slow. Like, not necessarily. I've done a lot of intentional work that has been foul. But yeah, like like Susan B. Anthony, I mean, I think something I think this, like, when someone is organized, even if they say like, oh, I'm organizing with you in mind as well, like you person who is very different from me, like when the offer is on the table for the thing that like they actually want, that really just like solves their like, you know, oppression in the way that they see it, how could they not take that offer that's on the table? That's like, right. Yeah, I mean, like, so in that way, it's like, it's hard to fault them because like you always worry. I've been in situations like that where it's just like, okay, if I don't take this, you know, like mostly in my experience, it's like I'm unemployed and I'm looking for work and like I get a job offer. I've always taken, up until recently, I've always taken the first, like, they say, like, you want to hire me? Okay. And then boom. And then I end up there and I'm like, wow, this job sucks. Like I should, like, oh, if only I could have held out. But like unemployment dries up, y'all. And like, you know, I had to like, and so it's like, I was never really thinking deeply about any of it. And only recently in my job search have I been able to like sit and think about like, okay, what do I really want? And I'm able to let opportunities pass me by because I don't need the money. But like in this case, it's like they have no way of knowing if they're going to get a deal this good again. So it's like, I can see why like white women, I can see why generally reformists of whatever kind are willing to settle for less. Because so often I feel like in life, we have to settle for less than what we deserve. And I'm like a, what are those called? Like the ambulance chaser, like attorney, where it's just like, you will not settle for less. Like you were in a car accident, you deserve like that's how I really feel about our work. I'm just like, don't settle. They have our money, they have all the resources, they have total ability to give us what we want, and they refuse. And so I'm like, don't you dare settle for less, none of you. Like it's almost like it's like an abusive relationship. I'm like, no.
Stop that.
Stop. Yeah, what is it? The Michael Jordan, stop. Get some help. Like, the help is me.
That's amazing. Real quick, thank you, Feminist Critique, for rating. I really appreciate y'all. Holy shit, Aislinn just subscribed for 2 months. That's wild. Yeah, let's get some. Let me get some ham six in the chat in honor of Feminist Critique coming in. I really appreciate y'all. Chantilly says there's a big reason why capitalism won't even pay living wages, because a lot of the reforms people ask for are cheaper. But capitalism needs folks to be trapped in a state of lack to really exploit folks. Exactly. Yep. Think about it constantly. Think about that constantly. So yeah, I mean, I don't even need to say anything, Doja Bird, because you just hit it all. Yeah. So one thing, but
I said something. I guess like. I love that. I mean, like that focus on like exploiting people. It's just like, that's why we settle for so much less, is because like we spend our whole lives being exploited, y'all. Like, and that shit runs deep. And so it's just like anything to alleviate the suffering. Like, I mean, in this case, I think that the bougie white women were really tripping if they thought but that was suffering to them. That was suffering to them. And so like, it's really hard to build the resolve to not take that first offer. And cause we can have it all, you know? So it's just like, yeah, when I see things, you know, it's like, we're talking about abolish the police. It's just like, I don't want community control of the police because like, that's a half measure. I want you to, I want people to be left the hell alone, you know? Like, yeah. Hell Rage Against the Machine said it well. If we settle for nothing now, we'll settle for nothing later. If we don't take action now, we'll settle for nothing later. That's true. That's it. Boom.
That's good stuff. I think this is maybe the final slide. The meaning of emancipation according to black women. Hey, that's fun. Got the fist going. This real quick, this last one, because y'all just killed it basically. Black women were subjected to unwanted advances from nearly all of their employers. Oh yeah, by the way, y'all, I think this is about as bad as it gets. I don't know if I need to drop another trigger warning, but nearly all of their employers would do advances on black women that were unwelcome. This was just what white men did. And I mean, I don't know if it still continues. I'm not a black woman. I mean, I'm not a non-white woman, so I don't know if this still continues to this day. But basically, this is your great grandfather, white folks. Your great grandfather was being creepy to the damn housemaid, okay? And no black woman would be believed in court. And this was very important because black women were almost all relegated to servants' work, which is where the vast majority of these unwanted advances were very easy to happen, right? In the home and in the privacy, right? And the white feminists completely ignored this. They ignored how they worked from sunrise to sundown their own black employees, and how their husbands and sons treated the black female employees, right? And none of this changed until World War II. So this is I think the last slide, and I think we can really talk about this here, where like it's not just that white women were, kind of looking to this quote unquote political expediency thing. They were benefiting themselves from racism on a literal daily basis. And so they were completely blind to it. I don't know if you remember that story from the book of like the lady coming for that other lady about like how she treats her employee. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, how she was treating her help, and it was just like she didn't even think of it that way.
She didn't even think about it. Yes.
She didn't think about it at all.
Zero. It's
wild. And then she just gets called out. I can only imagine what her face would look like. I think that's one of my like favorite things about this book is like I know exactly what her face looked like when she was told something about herself. I mean, it's like not the exact same, but like I fairly recently, like in a job I just left, like someone was saying, it was like we were doing all this like social justice organizing, and someone said to me like, oh yeah, we'll have the intern, we'll get an intern to do it. And I was like, oh, do we pay our interns? And they were like, no. Da, 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 da. And I was just like, so you think we're doing like holistic social justice organizing, but you don't pay the intern? And I just like had this, I was just like, I'm gonna have to tell these people that this can't continue. But like to them, that was okay that was happening, because as I didn't even make a face. I swear, y'all, I just kind of went, like, okay, I must have made a face. I didn't make the face I wanted to make, which was, oh my God, what are you doing? You cannot pay people to work, that's really bad. Yeah. I was just kind of like, okay. And then the woman, my supervisor, immediately went into this like, yeah, well, it's okay because like, like she's getting a lot of experience. She's in a social work program, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, but you know that shit's shady. But in this case, this woman, the thought had never even occurred to her. Like at least my manager in nonprofits, like she's heard that not paying interns is bad. Like someone has brought this up, like it's in the stew of like nonprofit work to argue about this. But in this story, that woman had not considered at all like what was happening. And I mean, it's just like, but I mean, I guess it's like her life is just so limited. I mean, like she probably just doesn't think about like what her servant goes through like at all, right? Like why would she? She's out there organizing. She's canvassing or like whatever. Yeah, I think she was canvassing. And yeah, I think in this particular piece, I personally can think of like as you were kind of saying like, does this exploitation, like sexual exploitation, like still happen to Black women? And like, I mean, certainly, right? Like, but I can even think about like it's just the subtle ways, even when you're not being like sexually exploited. So like I used to work as a cocktail server on Bourbon Street in New Orleans.
Bourbon
So
Street.
I had the genius skirt. Yeah. And like New Orleans is a place where like white people from Iowa go to like let loose, whatever. Like, and it was amazing to me how much of their letting loose was like being really rude to me. And like I say rude in like a bigger, like I'm almost talking like a person in 1900s, like the rudeness, like like jiggling their boobs in my face or like something like that, where I'm just like, I have not consented to this interaction. I really would, because like I was constantly being like objectified. And even though I was a server, like it was not uncommon. I think at least like once every 2 weeks, I would get solicited by like a guy like, oh, do you want to go to work? Yeah, like, and I would just be like, I work here. Like I work in this jazz club and I'm not like, and there's just no barriers. It's just like, this person exists for me to do whatever I want to. And so I think that those like vestiges of like that, it's like they're still very much alive. Is what I was thinking about like being vulnerable, because like I couldn't say anything to my boss about these interactions, because it's like the thing that I worked for was like in a hotel on Bourbon. So it was just like, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to report like someone who's in the hotel in one of the like most expensive suites. Like, oh yeah, that's going to go fine. Or like, oh, I'm going to report all these people who are in town for the swingers convention. Like, that's not going to work either. They want the convention to come back. Why would they like do anything to protect me at all? So like, yeah, in that job, I had to learn how to like, I was like always very polite, but I would like make faces. I'd be like, so that question you asked, do you think that was a good question you asked me? And then the person would usually be like, oh, right, I just kind of lost myself. And I'm just like, yeah, y'all really come to New Orleans to lose yourself, but I will definitely help you find yourself. Okay?
Good, Doja. I'm glad you stuck up for yourself like that. Help them find themselves. Chantilly just said it in the chat as well. Something very important. The idea that undocumented women still face this to this day. And the idea that like, and just like you said, you were subjected to unwanted advances, maybe not in the way that these housekeepers were, but still an unwanted advance, and it was for capitalist reasons, right? Like as in like it was literally the entire reason why that would quote unquote be okay, why you wouldn't eject that person from the get-go, is simply due to money. There's no one would say that it is an okay thing to do. No one would say that there's like a reasonableness to that, but simply it's just about money, and that's sad.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and one of the things it's like, of course, they get into in the text is like, there wasn't a way for, and this actually ties in really well with prison abolition, right? Because like Black women couldn't report any of this shit to the police. Like, oh, what you gonna do? Go tell them that like your white boss who like owns the so and so like he doesn't even have to own anything. They
said that.
They are not gonna take a report. They definitely didn't take reports at the time that this is talking about, and I'll tell you, they still don't take those reports. They said nope. And so it's just like, but this is why, like Black women are some of the like most prominent leaders in prison abolition, because when people are like, well, what do I do? If the police don't exist, I can't call the police. I'm just like, we've never been able to call the police.
Right.
This is a crisis situation here. And like, we don't call the police, not because like, again, this could be a thing. It's like Black people don't call the police because they have a culture of no snitching. It's like
bullshit. Right. No,
it's like, no, actually that's not the culture. The culture is that we never were able to rely on the police, and you used the police on us. That was what the whole point was. That's the entire. So like, so it's like, reading this, I'm just like, oh, this is where the work of, it's like, okay, you can't go to the police about like, you're a washerwoman, you're being sexually exploited by your boss. Like, you can't go to the police. So like, who do you turn to? Well, you turn like towards your community, right? For like some sort of solution. And I like to believe, I mean, like, I'm sure it wasn't all just like, oh, just deal with it. Like, I'm sure like some actual useful stuff happened in that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so many good templates for like, a broader idea of community defense, which is what I'm always trying to tell people. Like, community defense is a lot of different things. But yeah, like you see it here. This is like I feel like the beginnings of it, like not being able to go to authority because authority doesn't give a shit about you.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And the sheep never calls the wolves for help. Exactly. Oh my gosh, what about the rapists and murderers? Every time. You can answer that question a million different times and they will never hear you.
It's true. So this is the actual last slide. I do this on my stream all the time. I'm like, okay, this is the last slide. No, I'm just kidding. This is the last slide. but so one last thing here is the education and liberation, Black women's perspective, and how Black people sought education immediately and desperately after emancipation. And in fact, many people thought that emancipation would mean education for the first time. And I just thought the story of Myrtilla Minor was the one that was so beautiful in this, of like this woman who started a school for Black children. I don't know, she had some kind of near-death experience or something and thought God told her to make a school for Black children, and she was wild. But this is the only white woman that I have in this presentation that's like an okay one. But
yeah, I mean, like, I thought the whole like her near-death experience was really similar to Harriet Tubman's story, like of being for those of you who don't know, like Harriet Tubman was like struck in the head by like an iron or something when she was young. Like I think it was like the slave owner was like upset and like threw it at something, and it like happened to hit her, and so she suffered like seizures like her whole life. But she also like kind of in like the vein of like Joan of Arc, like saw visions from God. And
wow,
so
okay.
And it's like interesting to think about that too, with like, even bringing in somebody like John Brown. Like I'm always really curious about like the spiritual elements of like how people become like so deeply radical, because all these people are so deeply radical because they believe in like this like larger force, right? And then like how does that connect to like Black liberation theology, and like it's not a mistake that like the civil rights movement was led by a reverend, right? It's like that like belief that like some force has got you, because yeah, this white woman was really going in. She was just like, you won't stop me, actually. Like,
yeah.
I honestly, like that level of resolve, like I don't know if I have it. I'd like to get there. Like I'm like always thinking about that. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so for y'all who don't know the story of Myrtilla Minor, like I didn't, so she starts this school for Black children, and immediately all the white people are like, and when I say all, I do mean the entire area around her targets every single student and her herself with any way they possibly can. Arson, like they try to burn down the school several different times. Evictions, like they try to evict her, they try to evict the students. Mobs show up and throw stones at her and stuff, and Frederick Douglass is like, even he says like, are you sure about this? And she's like, yes. And Frederick Douglass is like, are you sure?
Right. He's it.
Okay.
Drink, like.
And because
yeah,
she's a little woman.
The mobs are amazing because it's like, this is actually white solidarity at work right here. Like, I mean, I guess the white working class can be organized against this bullshit. Like, no.
Oh shit. Yeah, I mean, if it's to protect white supremacy, to get our psychological benefit from white supremacy, yeah, we'll find a way to come together. So anyway, the really sad thing about a lot of this is, 40 acres and a mule, total bullshit. Immediate disenfranchisement, or like, prevention of getting the vote, using mob violence to basically re-enslave people, And when we say re-enslaved, like it really is in many ways like a re-enslavement. It is not like when we talk about wage slavery, like they were really using mob violence to basically keep people as slaves, right? And there were all these people who were working really hard. Like, this is not like a praise white woman moment. This is one white woman who did good things. There were tons and tons of black people who had secretly learned how to read under slavery and who became teachers at this time. And this whole section is about how, like, it's a kind of short section but Angela Davis was like, this is important enough for its own chapter, where it's like, if black people hadn't have been furiously seeking out education, like she says in the end, it's they might have been re-enslaved. And I just thought that was so interesting, because it's never, that part of emancipation and Reconstruction is just never talked about. Like, I literally had never heard about this until I read this chapter,
Yeah, I only really learned about, like, education, like, in Reconstruction period, because, like, this is, like, weird. I went down a rabbit hole years ago about Zora Neale Hurston, because I didn't know a lot about her. And she was actually, like, I remember I was shocked because she was, like, conservative, and she didn't believe in desegregating schools. And I was like, whoa. It's like, how could she not believe in that? Right. And so then in delving more into it, I was just like, oh, like, she wanted the schools to be separate, but actually equal, so that, like, the education didn't have to be Eurocentric. And I was like, okay, that makes sense to me. But that was the first time I ever actually learned about, like, what this time period in education was like. And I thought it was, like, interesting to read, like, this whole part about, like, this whole idea that they're like pushing back against, like, this idea that, like, black folks, like, can't be educated, or, like, don't have, or it'll make us really depressed. What is it? The teaching slaves to read and write tends to dissatisfaction in their minds and to produce insurrection and rebellion. Oh no! They produce insurrection and rebellion. They're dissatisfied, but it's all in their heads. The dissatisfaction lives here.
It's wild.
Material conditions. It's just all in your head. I love being told that my problems are all in my head. It's like, oh, you're depressed. It's just all in your head. Whoa! Now I'm cured.
It's wildness.
Well, yeah. So they're like, we don't care what you say. We, like, are going to learn, and how, like, dangerous that is. And black people and education, and, like, this idea that it's, like, so dangerous. That's just something we've been told. And it's something that comes up in most, like, black revolutionaries, like, work, right? Like, you see that, like, I think that's why, when I read things like Fred Hampton or, like, Assata Shakur, it's like, they're so deeply concerned with, like, I'm just telling this to you straight so you can get the education. And it just makes it so, like, I don't know, like, I'm just, like, always very, like, enthralled by that. That it's like, they're never really just, like, talking out their ass, like, oh, I know everything. They're just like, this is easily digestible. I'm going to give it to you. Like, this is like truly for the community, and it all started here.
Hell yeah. That's fantastic. Okay. Don't laugh at me.
Projection reading makes them dissatisfied. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, no, that's just because all the white people are like, I don't much enjoy learning more things about the horrible world we've created, and we should just not tell them. Like, idea.
No centrist Voltron. We already covered this stuff, so we don't need to do this whole other slide. I just want to real quick. We talked about how terrible Susan B. Anthony was. We talked about Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass, and how, Susan B. Anthony disinvited Douglass to speak, and lynchings. We talked about all this. Well, one interesting thing is Katie Elizabeth Stanton, eventually becoming mega racist and supporting literacy requirements for voting. I just thought that was so wild. Is herself releasing in her little paper, that whole thing about how literacy requirements are good because we have 4 million white women to fight back against the foreigner and the black person in the United States. I was like, this is just racist.
Yes. Like, appreciate them saying it with their chest. But Wow. It was like, and that's the thing that I actually like appreciate about this chapter is that it's like they made all these little concessions. They were like, we're gonna get these like Southern white women in the mix, and we're gonna like move towards. And then it was not that long before it all just became white supremacy. Just that fast.
So the Faustian bargain, the deal with the devil that these people do, it poisons it. It completely really ruins it.
Poison is such a good term for it. It's just like it's not fast, but it is efficient. I mean, wow.
Exactly. Yeah. So my final little takeaways from the part one, this first half of the book, is that black people have struggled furiously, and that this image of passivity and intellectual laziness is just it's an evil, pernicious fabrication that has exactly zero basis in reality. That black people have been fighting for their lives for 400 years. And that these Faustian bargains, these deals with the devil they're everywhere, and they keep coming up, and they keep poisoning movements. And that the capitalists rely on that the capitalists are always trying to find a way to make a workforce take less money. And they can make the white people work for less if they can give them the psychological benefit of white supremacy, and they can make the non-white people work for less by keeping them subjugated. They can make the men work for less by telling them how strong and wonderful they are as men, and they can keep the women subjugated in the exact same way as the non-white people are. And so there is this purposeful psychological manipulation that goes on in order to maintain low labor prices. I mean, that was one of the main things that I took away from the book. Do you have before we end the stream? I think we should probably cut it in about 10 minutes because I know I've taken up much more of your time than I anticipated. but yeah, I just wanted to hear those were some of the things that I kind of took away from this first half of the book, and I'd love to hear what would you want to leave us with? What was if we was gonna read this, if you was gonna give us hey, this is why you should read this book? What's your takeaway? What's your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I noted, and I think I've already I've probably spoken this to death, but it's just it's just seeing those the dynamics between these prominent historical figures play out, and these arguments that are just echoes of, I mean, it's like the arguments that we're having today are just this all over again. They sound a little different. And so, but in that, it's just we actually have a historical record that some of the arguments we're having, this is useless. None of this is worth engaging with at all. And yeah, I think for me, something that I get out of the work is just, it's even at the beginning we were talking about black women were subjugated just like men, but even that goes back to the centering of men. And what I think is really strong about this work is by telling us the missing history of black women in these different periods in time, you're better able to grasp what exploitation looks like just on the whole. And I think that there are so many conversations that we have, it's I can think about right now, it's you're talking about okay, Joe Biden's not gonna close up this shit at the border, right? And it's just to some people, the exploitation is fine provided a Democrat is doing it, right? And so it's and what we're really getting at here is that even though there are important differences to discuss in the ways in which people are exploited, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone has to be exploited for me to have something. That's one of the biggest lies of it's white privilege exists because like, oh, we have to subjugate this group of people. No, like, oh, to uplift. I mean, you even see it here in this like line about like the poor white man, embittered by his poverty and humiliated by his inferiority, finds no place for himself and his children, then will come to grapple between the races. Talking about this race war. You could literally stop the entire like idea of a race war by not doing a hecking capitalism.
Yeah, right.
So, and they're saying like, well, the poor white man, he doesn't have anything. I'm like, you can give him stuff.
Right.
That's not my responsibility. And so like, I mean, that's just like a perfect encapsulation of what this text is getting at, is that like, they just create these ridiculous arguments that like, oh, and this is like the poor white man needs somebody to punch down on. None of us need to punch down, over, cross on each other, never at all.
Yeah.
But capitalists want us to, right?
Yes.
So that was like my big thing in this book, was just reading this and being like, oh, I see this on Twitter every lefty cycle. Like,
That's such a good point, Doja Bird. This idea that like centering men, and I mean I'm guilty of it. I did it in my slides, but the idea that like centering the people who are not actually oppressed and relating the oppression to them, rather than simply looking at the nature of the oppression and marginalization, keeps you from fully understanding the oppression and marginalization. This is a very interesting concept, and it's I'm gonna try to go forward and like think about when I do that. Like look at like just take a step back and ask myself when I look through my slides, like, am I centering men? Am I centering white people? Because of course, I'm a white man, so like I'm gonna put things through that lens. But nonetheless, I am missing a key point by relating everything back to the allegedly non-oppressed, right? By relating things back to me, I'm not seeing. It's not just that I'm not seeing what's happening for other people. I'm not seeing the entire system of exploitation as a whole.
Yeah, and I think it's like you have to be able to see that system to really understand. It's like what we're talking about when we say collective liberation, because I actually like in organizing like in an anti-racist way, organizing for like my liberation as a queer Black woman, I am actually trying, even though I get mad sometimes at like the average like white guy socialist, I am also trying to liberate him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't see it that way, but I am, because I'm just like, I can tell you're not having a good time over there. You can't lie to me. Like, and I think that's like, but that's why, it's like, I think the Combahee River Collective got there because of like a deep understanding of things like this. It's like, is that none of us are actually having a good time. The only people are actually having a good time are like the 1%. And then everyone else is getting like little piecemeal things while being told like, hey, it could be worse. You could be that guy. Like it's that there's a little comic that people share about. It's like
the cookies thing.
Like, I want to take your cookie, and then like the capitalist has like all the cookies. Yes. And yeah, in that case, it's like even like the majority of white men have like just like, okay, you might have 2 cookies to rub together, like. But they're probably also like, okay, I shouldn't hate on Chips Ahoy. It's a perfectly fine cookie. Reduced fat Chips Ahoy. I don't know if anyone's ever eaten those. They are not very good. And I'm just like, we can have some like homemade cookies and not any of this. And the capitalist is like, shh, no, don't tell them. Like, it's wild.
Citrus Voltron says that's cookies for crackers. Oh shit!
My dad bought the reduced fat chips when I was a kid, and I was like, "You can never buy these again. This is disgusting.
It's terrible.
I have a cookie. Why would I want it like that? Like, I don't. Just give me all of the cookie. Like, you can't make a cookie healthy. It's not supposed to be. That's not
God. It's so good. Well,
but I eat those soft cookies. I'm a soft cookie person. I know it's a very controversial food. I talk about them a lot on Twitter. with the like terrible bad icing. It's terrible bad. They're not correct cookies. I know this, but I really like them.
You got friends in the chat saying hashtag soft cookie gang. That is not a real gang. Y'all are not. Oh shit!
Garbage. They're like pure sugar, and I'm not sure. And like I don't know what else. Oh gosh.
Y'all funny. Oh shit! This is really great, Doja Bird. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. This was an experience. You know, I've never, like I said, I've never done anything like this. I love that it's like a little forum chat. You know, like.
This is what I tell you know, the people who follow me. I say, like, this is really, it's like when I used to teach, this is like a perfect like forum, as you say, right? Like in the classical sense almost of like, we get to teach a little class and people get to chat and have a little forum going in the sideline, right? And so people get to, like, we get to learn from them, and as they learn from us, it feels really good. So that's why I do this Twitch thing.
Yeah,
like,
everyone's just like really, y'all are like so open. You take space when you need it. You like aren't afraid to like engage and like actually talk. Like this is such a nice little thing that I didn't know was happening. You know, like I honestly thought all streaming was when y'all get really mad at like a particular I won't say his name because I think that would be very bad. Like, yo, no, Frank Rat did it. Anyway, yeah. So I didn't know that there were little pockets where people were actually having like deeper conversation and like really holding one another in that. That's really cool.
Hell yeah. I think Chantilly's right though. If you ever feel like streaming, we would definitely watch. So.
I think about it. I think I'd like to just like, you know, if we want to do a part 2 of this book, you know, I'll come back on. If y'all didn't hate that I like made this go on for like nearly 3 hours.
No, it's great.
You know, and I have some ideas around like just building up more of our understanding about like how to have that real talk. You know, like we were talking about, like white people don't have real talk. Like, how can we just create spaces where like we get to like just be with one another and be really present and just like educate one another? Because like I said, like I don't have a really deep background. I'm just now getting the political educational, like traditional, like white guys who wrote stuff, which like not a problem. That's not why I haven't read Lennon. I really have not read him because I don't understand what he's saying. Like, and so I'm like trying to get that, you know? And so, yeah, I guess I should say, because everyone needs to go do other things with their night. If you ever want to chat with me, like message me on Twitter, Discord. I'm like pretty available. I can give you my Discord as well if you message me on Twitter. Like I'm always happy to like just like connect with folks and chat, and like, you know, if I can help you in any way to like figure out a text like this, if you need resources like on like prison abolition or whatever, like I love getting to connect with folks. So like, please give me opportunities to connect with you, and you know, plug in where I'm useful. So thanks so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Doja Bird. I appreciate you. So, all right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for coming by. Let's raid out somewhere. Let's figure out who's. So what we do is we go attack. It's not attack. We join another channel. Chantilly says we should do all 3 of us together. Should do it. So let's see if Lawsuit is around. Lawsuit. How the hell do you spell Sue? I'm so bad at this. Sioux. Yeah, we're gonna raid Lawsuit tonight. Yeah, so thank you so much, Doja Bird, and good night, everybody. I will see y'all later. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Let's get it. All right, let's do this. When we raid, it will automatically flip it over. So I will say, okay, let's do this. And then we're done. Okay, you're off the hook now.
Oh, really? So it like moves everyone over to like another stream?
Yep. So we are officially booted from our stream, and it has gone to another stream.
Oh, so